This is Siddharth Alwalia. Welcome to the 100x Entrepreneur Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Prime Venture Partners, an early stage VC fund led by Amit Somani, Shripati Acharya, and Sanjay Swami. Prime is often the first institutional investor in category creating tech startups in fintech, SaaS, healthcare, and education, such as MyGate, Quizzes, MFine. To know more about Prime, visit primevp.in. Today, I have with me Rahul Chaudhary, Managing Partner, Stellaris Venture Partners. Stellaris is an early stage fund focused on seed to Series A and hence invested in some of the well known companies like Mamaearth, Shop 101, Whatfix, Vogo. Prior to Stellaris, Rahul was a partner at Helion Venture Partners, where he invested in companies like ShopClues, Big Basket, Simply Learn, and LiveSpace. Also, before starting his journey into venture capital, Rahul had stints in product management and consulting roles at Microsoft, MarketRx, i2 Technologies, and BCG. Rahul, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Rahul, we would love to, I have just summarized your journey, but we'd love to know from you, how did the various dots connect themselves after IIT Kanpur or even during IIT Kanpur? What led you to into various fields?
So I won't say this was a very planned journey. Doing engineering and MBA back to back, in hindsight, maybe not the best of the idea, but I did do so as was the trend with a lot of people at that time. And after MBA, again consulting was quite glamorous, so I ended up joining BCG. But very soon I realized that without any operating role or any operating experience, at least I was not very comfortable advising people who have been running their businesses for 10, 20, 30 years. So I decided to take some operating experience and ended up joining a software business out of US called i2. Again, had no idea what the role was. Did product management. I again didn't like large company setups. So I ended up joining a smaller startup in East Coast called MarketRx. Uh, and around 2005, was trying to start a company in India, and Microsoft seemed like a good soft landing platform. So came back to India with Microsoft. That company never took off. One of the big lessons was that we were always scared to leave our jobs. So we were trying to do it in parallel, which in hindsight looks like obviously a bad idea. But this was 2005. And during Microsoft, I ended up interacting with some venture firms and somehow found that to be an interesting idea because it was a kind of mix of you know working with founders, building companies, which I liked at BCG. But it was a much longer commitment. You didn't give a recommendation and go away. And again, coincidentally, Helion was looking for someone, so I ended up joining Helion, and that role I really liked. Spent 9 years there, and maybe that's when I found my calling to be an investor. Also, was very lucky that this was the time when venture capital was gaining ground in India around 2006 and 7. So also got to see a lot of large companies being built in front of my eye. And then when time was right, three of us left and started Stellaris. So yeah, so that's been my journey. As I said, not too much of planning, all just happened by coincidence. But really lucky to be where I am.
Rahul, which are the sectors at Stellaris you focus on?
So I look at three or four broad areas. I look at anything in retail, which includes brands, commerce place. I also look at education. I look at agriculture or agri-tech, as we call it. And then I look at horizontal content and social network kind of platforms. So these are the four broad areas. Obviously, as a fund, we are somebody who look for tech as core to the business model or software product itself, and we come in at early stage. So those are the two criterias that we have when we make an investment.
And Rahul, consumer brands, is one of your love. How did you invest in Mamas? Like, how did you find it, and what was the conviction very high at that point in time that you invested in Varun and Ghazal? Because now everybody knows the story, in hindsight.
Yes, yes. So, at Helion, I again had a pleasure of investing in a consumer brand called ID Fresh. and at least that gave me. And before that, we had invested in few retail-oriented businesses like salon chains like YLG and all. So I had a good appreciation for what scale consumer brands can get once they're successful. And around the time when we left and started Stellaris, it became clear that some of these horizontal commerce platforms like Amazon and Flipkart were all gaining good, attention span from consumers. And it looked like that digital first brand could be an interesting play where you have very high margins. At the same time, you have the scalability if the brand and the product find a right fit with the consumer. Uh, and there are three or four broad areas that we still look at. Personal care is one large space, fashion is the other one, home, uh, and high value food items. And the reason being that we needed to find areas where things can be sold online, both on these commerce platform and also direct to consumer through your own website. And that meant two things. One is high gross margin and good enough AOV so that you can make money on every order. The second criteria we had was stickiness for the consumer, which meant high frequency products. So personal care, food, fashion, these are all high frequency products. Uh, and then we started looking at companies, and clearly, Mamath, when I met Varun for the first time, it was very clear that he was a founder which had a good mix of both brand thinking and online thinking. And that's something that is hard to find in one single team. Varun, while came from FMCG background, had taken online courses to learn digital marketing, SEO, and all while he was building Mama. So I found that passion to understand and appreciate online piece quite well, while his whole his life was, doing traditional FMCG at Coke and Unilever and all. And same goes for Ghazal. So it was a very good combination that we found, and clearly the space made sense. Obviously, nobody, at least we didn't have, the kind of growth that they've seen. We didn't anticipate that. So clearly, a lot of other things also, in some sense, went right for the business, and the environment was all suitable for their growth. But a lot of kudos goes to the founding team at Mamaearth on how they thought of the brand and how capital efficiently they build the business to reach where they are.
And you were the second check after Fireside in
Yes.
it, the second institutional check in that. So what? Because it's initially focused on a niche space. Now they have broadened to personal care. Uh, you know, uh, so initially focused on mom and babies, especially during the pregnancy to post delivery. What made you think the space can become so large that it could be a billion-dollar play?
So actually, it is nothing to do with D2C brand. In general, the way we look at some of these startups is, are they solving one problem well? And can they
Yeah,
expand from that one problem to multiple other problems?
yeah,
So that holds true here as well. What they were solving was one problem, and once the brand becomes successful and well known, there is a lot that can be done from that one particular problem to solving other problems, and that's what they ended up doing. So it is not something, you look at kind of businesses that have worked well. Flipkart started by selling books, then electronics, and then everything.
yeah.
So this is a classic example, and there are multiple of these examples worldwide of companies that become large. They do end up solving multiple problems. So that was the case here as well, and that has been demonstrated in multiple offline brands as well, right? In brand itself, you see one brand like Himalaya started with one category and they've expanded into multiple categories. So there are, obviously there are boundaries for a brand, but within that boundary, there is enough room to expand from one single product range. And that was the thesis behind Mamaearth as well.
And when you focus on consumer brands, so you do believe that one single brand in India can become, let's say, 100 million ARR business tomorrow, 5 to 6 years down the line.
Yeah. So Mamaearth is already hitting that number, very close to that. So I don't see why that can't happen. As in, there are enough examples from offline world where that has happened. Uh, So enough of personal care brands are, few thousand crores in revenue.
Yeah.
Enough of fashion brands are of that size. So there is no reason why a new brand cannot be of that size. The online part adds a lot of fire to the time it takes. The traditional brand takes a lot more time. The reason online brands have a better chance, one, the distribution is democratized. So if you have a good product, you don't need to work with distributors and then place your products in multiple retail shops and then hope that consumer will pick it up. Now that the shelf is infinite, so that helps. Second, a lot of brand building can happen online through the influencers and other channels that are available. And last, the iteration that the company can do with product brand value proposition can be done much faster online, because again the consumer is giving you direct feedback when they're buying your product. There are ratings, there is repeat, there are a lot of those signals that you can get, which tells you whether this particular SKU or this particular fragrance is something that the consumer likes or not. Now, these are all advantages which clearly Mamaearth, took, and which is where the speed to size, how much time it takes could be much faster in case of a maybe a D2C brand versus trying to build it through a traditional route.
And but for a venture capital firm, that's why I'm asking that. Do you think multiple such brands, if you invest in, uh, can go to 100 mil ARR, thereby becoming a $500 million or $600 million company?
Yeah, I think so. I think that is clearly possible. But the business has to build in the right manner. A lot of companies end up burning a lot of money. So I think if you build it in the right manner, you actually can build large and a very good outcome for every stakeholder in the company. So that is clearly, obviously you have to be in the right space. You have to get the brand right. You have to protect your moat. There are a lot of things that have to go right. But this like the advantage of consumer brand is that the margin structure is very favorable, and if you do it in the right way, you actually can do it in a very low amount of capital also.
So till the time the brand is built, what's the moat? Let's discuss in this case of Mamaearth when they were building
Mhm.
it.
So see, first of all, brand also goes through its own evolution. When you start, it is typically a functional benefit that the consumer needs to like, and it has to be different than what is otherwise available in the market. That's when you stand out. Now those functional differentiation doesn't stay too long, because others will copy you, and what you need to do is to move from a functional differentiation to an emotional differentiation. So, and that's the journey, that allows you to stay ahead of your competition. The other piece is your ability to figure out new trends uh, ahead of your competition, which was the point I was making around product iteration. That uh, are you able to find, let's say, certain kind of ingredient will become important 6 months from now. Now, if you can build it into your NPD, you actually can launch products at right time. Uh, and third is utilizing different channels to uh, to basically not only do marketing and transaction oriented business, but also do brand oriented activities. So right set of influencers, right set of branding activities. Uh, that so all these three things have to match together to build a moat. Uh, and there is nothing which cannot be copied, as in there are, the innovations are not very different, and that may vary from sector to sector. So let's say if you're a fashion brand, design becomes important. If you're a food brand, taste becomes important. If you are a personal care brand, maybe let's say skincare brand, then the product experience becomes important when product is being applied. So all those are like kind of given. That if you don't do a good job there, then anyways none of the what I otherwise said counts. But after a good product, those are some of the other things that you keep in mind.
And what are the other online first, D2C Indian brands that you respect and why?
I would say uh, in D2C space, maybe I really like the value proposition Oziva has.
Yeah.
So that's one brand that I like. In fashion, I have liked Fable Street a lot. Uh, in uh, you know, I'm just thinking of different categories. Uh, I think mattresses have few very interesting brands in India. Uh, I would say Yoga Bar has done a good job, though obviously they're not just D2C, they're D2C plus
Yeah,
offline as well, as in they have both the components.
yeah.
Uh, uh, so yeah, these are some of the brands that are quite interesting in the D2C space.
So because I ran a company in a mom and baby care space called Baby Gogo,
Hmm.
which was, building online experiences for mothers. For example, it was a community. You can imagine a Quora
Nice.
for mothers. The company got finally acquired by Shiros, which is a women's social network. But in those 2 3 years, I saw these because it was from 2015 to 2017. I saw the evolution of Mama Earth and Mom's Good, the two known brands in this space, very closely. Because I remember meeting Varun at a Starbucks when he had about to just launched, and I think one of the VPs of Coca-Cola had put his money and was an advisor to them. From that point of time to every 3 months when I met Varun, the aggressiveness, the pace was so fast. It was almost looking like an online company, right? Which hasn't raised money, but the pace was fast. I was myself amazed, the way they were growing, and they were a sellers on Baby Gogo. But hats off to the team, the way they executed.
Very true. Very true.
Well, another area you are really excited about is EdTech, and you look at Stellaris and EdTech. You recently invested in. So, I would want to ask: Is EdTech too much crowded today because of the opportunity, and are there space for any other billion-dollar companies? Because Baiju and an Academy and Topper, have they taken the shelf entirely?
I don't think so. So, if you think of the largest or the large companies in this space, I don't have exact numbers. Maybe the largest would be like few $100 million in revenue. If you look at the education spend in this country beyond formal education, that runs in like tens of billions of dollars, right? Uh, and at least I feel there are multiple ways to cut the pie, and it is not, or it will be hard to imagine if one single company ends up being winner in all of them. Uh, this is a services business. It is not selling, a mobile phone or a book that one single player will be able to be the dominant guy doing those activities. Because of different experiences, in some sense, I think there are multiple winners possible in each space, and there are multiple spaces available. So there is higher ed, there is uh, K-12, there is within K-12, there is test prep, there is tuition, there is extracurricular. So there are a lot of activities, and the other piece is that increasingly global market for India edtech companies is also opening up. There are several areas in which I would say Indian education companies will be considered as the legitimate owner of that space. Just like in Ayurveda, India would have a very known standing in the world. Similarly, in yoga, I would say in STEM, globally Indians are respected, and there are so many other areas in which Indians could play a very interesting role building tech companies globally from India. So at least I don't think this space is crowded. Uh, and that is why we are excited about the space. We just invested in Swiftlearn, also looking at other companies. Uh, eh, and obviously, what we want to know is why would you be able to win? And yes, other guys will also try. Somebody will have more money, less money. So why would more capital uh, uh, will not be a deterrent for your growth? So those are questions we ask when we invest. We ask ourselves. But at least I don't think the space is saturated as far as opportunities are concerned.
Right. What is the problem SwiftLearn is solving, and what made you invest in them?
So there are a couple of things. One is what we saw as a trend that more and more parents want their kids to succeed, in competitive exams at some point of time or in schools. And because I was an investor in Topper, I had seen that for test prep very clearly. The second was that the options that these parents have. See, teaching as a profession is not something that has been gaining, momentum in our country. General teachers get paid poorly. So it is not as if the quality of teacher is improving in general. So that is true everywhere, including schools as well as after school. So the options that parents had were very limited in the K-10 segment. And third is emergence of live video. That it was becoming after 4G and 4G expansion, it was clear that live video was a way of life. So what we felt, Swiflearn, when Abhinav, the founder, he came, the idea was basically to solve the problem of tuitions or after school activities on the academic side using an online delivery method. The challenge is that the segment that these guys are going after, which is maybe 6 to 16-year-old kids, they are not motivated to study. Unlike somebody preparing for a medical exam or an engineering exam, where there is a lot of motivation. And what that means that the business model has to change. When a kid is motivated to study, you can have them sit in a hall of 500 kids, and a star teacher will teach you, and they'll learn, which is what some of the test prep guys started doing, where they'll one class will have 100 kids and they will learn, and it works. But when you are in a grade 6 studying for your math exam for half yearly, students' attention span is very low. So what you need is a model which is smaller class, where the teacher keeps the kids engaged. Uh, the second challenge is there is no standard test that happens for grade 6 math in a school in Gurgaon. That test or whatever that exam is specific to that school in Gurgaon for that board. So unlike a JEE or a medical entrance preparation, which is one single exam that you're preparing for, here the curriculum and the program you create varies from school to school, and that makes the business very complex. And that is why we felt a standalone business makes sense for both these reasons: the model as well as how the pedagogy has to be designed. And Abhinav had that insight, and that is why we invested behind it.
And so basically, to summarize it, they provide a platform for teachers to host live classes.
Yeah, but that is so sorry, maybe I didn't make it clear. The third piece is we did not feel that this can be a marketplace platform because parents have no way of figuring out who's a good teacher. It is very hard to for parent, in unlike let's say e-commerce where you buy a shirt, if you don't like it, maybe you don't wear it too much. Here the currency is students' time. So it can't be that after 3 months I realize the teacher is not a good teacher because then my kid's time is gone, right? So the third angle was that it will be a full stack play. So as far as consumer or customer is concerned, it is Swiflearn who's teaching the kid. It is Swiflearn who's taking onus of good quality teaching. And if that teacher is not working out, Swiflearn will replace that teacher. Uh, but it is not parent choosing a teacher. So in that sense, it's not a marketplace. Obviously, the back end, they do have teachers who devote full week, half a week, depending on their availability. But that is Swiflearn's problem. That is not a parent's problem.
So, for example, if a kid's studying in Delhi in DPS RK Puram, so when a parent reaches out to Swiflearn, they would know which teacher to
Exactly.
place
And what
that.
content and what to teach and what not to teach and all. Exactly. And they collect feedback. So if let's say over a period of time, teacher is not if student is not liking teacher, they will figure out why. If they need to be changed, they'll change it to replace some other teacher. So that's all Swiflearn's responsibility. Uh, so that's the SLA they have taken.
And what are the other open spaces in edtech where you believe large companies can be created? Because as you mentioned in the podcast earlier, Unicorn can focus on only so much in the sectors they are operating in.
So one is, as I said, global place. So clearly, Whitehead is doing it. Some few other companies. Then that is just in coding. I would argue similar global places are possible in a lot of other areas. So any co-curricular activity, extracurricular activity. Similarly, in higher ed, things like giving online degrees. That is something that you can do for India as well as globally across India. Uh, uh, There are enough of these training companies preparing you to become a good software programmer. Again, there is no market leader yet, and that could be a large space as well. So there are enough of these kind of plays that are possible, which are purely online, uh, and can be large opportunities.
And coming to the third area where you focus on is the Shop 101. So help us understand your thesis when you invested in the Shop 101 and the company's growth till now.
Sure, sure. So first of all, so basically the third area is broadly commerce, and Shop 101 is one example of that investment. The reason to invest behind Shop 101 was again very clear. We made this investment, I think, in early 2018, uh, and it was clear that there were enough online influencers who had started doing commerce. People who will build their own brands, get items from their local area, sell it on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. But the tools and the technologies they were using were Facebook Messenger, some bank gateway to take payment, and standalone logistics arrangement where they will send the item to the customer. So it was very clear that there was no e-commerce platform that they were using. So that was the first thing that Shop 101 started doing, which is to build a e-commerce kind of play for these individual entrepreneurs, where they still stay connected with their social media accounts through this technology platform, but they could offer a catalog, a website, a payment gateway. Very important, to offer logistics, which has COD. Till before that, an individual guy could not get a COD on DTDC or any other courier company. But because they combined this offering and they went and negotiated, they could get a COD and a return possibility for these individual influencers and resellers. The second, so this was the tech and the logistics, so two pieces. The third piece that they solved for is the sourcing part. That these individuals are always limited by the suppliers they have always been dealing with. So in that sense, they are unable to expand that range and variety in their offering. And what Shop 101 does is they go and tie up with more than few thousand manufacturers across the country and make their product available to these influencers, who then curate based on their follower base. So somebody in some geography might decide that silk yellow color works well, and somebody in some other place might decide that cotton black and darker shades work well in my follower segment. So they don't showcase all the possible combinations from the supply base. They choose and pick and share only those that they think will sell. So in that sense, they do the curation. And as and when the order comes, it's a dropship model. So these individuals don't have to increase their inventory, uh, and still be able to increase their business. So that was the thesis. Company has grown quite well. In fact, in last several months, they also, I would say, uh, they make good cash on every order that they do. So that's something that we have been, obviously now that's been close to 2 years. At least that gives us a lot of confidence that there is good money to be made in the business while you are building and growing this business.
And does it directly compete with Misho?
To some extent, yes. But there is one part which, as I was mentioning, this whole commerce, or what people call a lightweight Shopify integrated with logistics. Now that is something that I think Shop One was one of the unique companies from that time, which has been continuing. Most of the other guys have been primarily doing the supply side business, which is to tie up with manufacturers and help people sell those items. But the first model allows, let's say I'm a fashion designer who does not want any other item other than my own products to be sold on my website. Now that is a model that Shop 101 supports. Other people don't.
Rahul, moving forward, help us know. We discussed about the companies and the sectors which worked at yours. Uh, which you led at Stellaris. So tell us about the things which didn't work, which you led, and what were your learnings from them?
Yeah, so we had invested in this startup again at a business plan stage called Munch. What they were trying to build was you can call them quote unquote Twitter for Indian customers, which the idea was to have uh, slightly knowledgeable conversations, but more in the way Indians want it to be. So in some sense, you can argue what we discuss on our WhatsApp group, in our families, in our college groups, and all, if that could be brought onto one single platform. So that was the idea. Uh, uh, you know, while really like the team that started it, I think the challenge we realized was that at least in those years, most of the new age online population that was coming in India, entertainment stayed their biggest mind share. And when I say entertainment, that would mean social media platform, gaming, and all. Having conversations of that kind of public platform was unfortunately something that we could not make happen. And I think it is just a question of timing, maybe another few years, and we'll find such players also emerge. But given where we are in, our internet journeys as a nation, I think entertainment has taken a much larger share than all other conversations. So, and see that in the usage of Twitter versus, let's say, an Instagram or Facebook, even within not only in India but globally also. But in India, I would say that difference is even more stark.
Yeah, and even when TikTok was there, it was occupying a huge
Yeah,
mind share.
same thing. So yeah, so it was clearly my mistake on on reading the market wrong as far as
Yeah.
timing is concerned.
Any other things which you missed investing in very closely,
Oh, there are enough
which
of
went
them.
on big?
There are more than enough of what we have missed so clearly. And I think I once tweeted, we were very close to, and we would have loved to come into this company called Pratilipi. Amazing founder,
Yeah,
amazing company.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, that is one of the big misses from that year. Yeah.
But do you still believer in the Indian content space? Because we have seen a lot after TikTok got banned, 10 of such platforms emerge. Monetization still remains a challenge, uh, and so the power of global players to spin up a app overnight is still there.
Yeah. So see, I think uh, so. More than monetization, my challenge is, and which is what I really liked in Pratilipi, was that the virality and organic growth, which is missing in most of the social media apps we see. And there is nothing wrong in spending money to acquire and retain customers if you have the money. Now, at least as a fund, we don't have that philosophy that you keep on investing behind growth. Uh, so at least we have stayed away from that model. As I said, there must be, I'm sure there will be other successes that will emerge. Uh, and if somebody can figure out an organic or a viral way to grow or retain their customers, I think that will be a model that will still be of interest to us.
Got it. And you don't see monetization as a problem in
No,
this
so which is
sector?
why I'm saying, if you can, monetization will happen. Question is when. So see, with the online ad spends going up, there is, if you wait for another 4 or 5 years, these businesses will start making good money. The challenge is that how much cash do you need to reach that timeline? So if you are more organic growth driven business or the model itself, you allow for yourself to use less cash and be relevant as and when monetization starts kicking in. So today, the impression eCPM that you will get for these users could be very low, but tomorrow it will grow. If people are spending more time, they're sticking around and all. There is no reason why it will not grow. But you need to have the staying power to be around till that day happens.
So as I said that in the last 3 years at Stellaris, you have done only four investments, led only four investments. Why is that?
So, see, as a fund, we do between 4 to 6 investments a year.
Yeah,
And there are now, we till last year we had 4 people who used to lead deals. Now we have 3 people who used to lead deals. Now we have 4 people who leads deal.
yeah,
We typically end up taking quite a bit of time before we decide to make an investment. So there is a
Yes.
lot more thought that goes in. And in that sense, at least our view is that between one to two deals per year per person is what has worked for us in the past. Uh,
Yeah.
so at least that's a pace we have maintained. There's one more investment that we have done which we have not announced. So in that sense, it is not four but five, but that doesn't matter. At
Yeah.
least our view is that one to two per partner per year is a good number. So at
Yeah.
least I think this is a like the number that we had planned for and that we maintained also.
But you mentioned that there is now a fourth lead in the fund.
Yeah.
I believe who is Arpit.
Yes.
So now we'll see
Hopefully,
at
yes.
least couple of more
Yes.
couple of more investments
True, true,
uh,
true.
uh, coming up every year from Stellaris. Rahul, I follow you guys very closely. You, Alok, Ritesh on Twitter. You mentioned you three all together discuss about biases a lot. What are the biases in investing? Which play a role in your decision making?
See, so there are certain biases which are around founders. X kind of founder or Y kind of founder, or what traits have we seen in the past? How did they play out? So those are sometimes team related biases. Then there are model related biases, and then there are sector related biases. Uh, so I'll give you an example, and this is before COVID. So obviously during COVID things might look very obvious, but late last year we did a session where, and we have, there is a team which is three of us who have been around and maybe slightly, above 40 in age, and then there is a team which is, in the 30s age group. So obviously a lot of time around a model when we have a discussion and we say, we have seen that it does not work, the other part of the team will always ask, why do you guys say so? And it is very interesting to have that discussion. So we did a session. One of the examples we discussed was this whole retail oriented models. And there was a pushback from rest of the other members of the team, the younger members, as to why do you guys believe that retail oriented models don't scale well? And at that time, we were seeing people running extracurricular classes inside OYOs, for example. Right? So there are companies doing that. There are companies who are sending teachers to your home. So not exactly always retail, but which had physical component. And then there are people who are running stores also. Uh, so we had a long discussion as to why we believed that that challenge stays. At the same time, there are models where people sell software for free and one day hope to make money, or by lending make money. So these are all different biases three of us come with on what model will work, which sector will have a challenge or not have a challenge. Uh, but what is important is also to keep on questioning these biases, which is the session that Alok might have talked about or you might have heard of. That because things also change, right? And as somebody who's been around too long, you also start believing in your own Kool-Aid or drinking your own Kool-Aid. And at least uh, we try to make efforts to keep on questioning those biases. Sometimes we change it. Sometimes we still continue with what we have.
And what changes have you seen in yourself? In terms of growth as an individual over a period of time, and what biases you have lost? I would ask.
Uh, so I, I think till about 4 5 years back, I never had. So I had a lens of who might be a good founder, what might be a good model. But this whole notion of founder market fit was something that I was not as conscious of when we were investing. I think over last few years, that at least framework has also been part of the evaluation framework. That while market might be great, team might be great, but will they be the right team in this market? And sometimes it's a question of how blue ocean the market is or how the red ocean the market is, and you might need different kind of founders for that. Uh, right. Uh, so I think that is like one area that I have changed my mindset. Early on, we used to try to size the market a lot. At least I have stopped doing that more or less, because in early stages, what we've realized is the final shape of the business could be very different than where you start. So trying to build models and say that after 5 years this company will be this size and it will exit at this value. I think those are all, like, we'll always go wrong. Either we'll be totally wrong, it will be a zero outcome, or it will be totally like other way right, otherwise, uh, and it will be a very much larger outcome. So it's very hard to model how large the outcome will be. As long as you believe model has scalability and it's the right team, and there is a large pain point to be solved, at least that becomes more important than trying to find what could be the size of the market. I think increasingly we are also, and this was one bias we had, but increasingly as a team we are also very open to global markets on consumer side. Now, obviously, it is not true for every sector and every uh, product, because even there you need to have a right to win. Just like in SaaS, just by building a company from India doesn't mean you'll have a right to win. So you need to find that. But I think there are several sectors in which that is possible, as world is becoming increasingly more amenable to global offerings. So yeah, these are some of the examples that come to mind.
Any current examples you see right now?
So if not from our company, like clearly Mamaearth is finding good traction, but it is more a pull versus a push today. As in, a lot more people are coming from other countries wanting to carry their product. But I would say clearly Whitehead is a classic example. There are few companies in the Ayurveda space which are doing that. In the toy space, you have Play Shifu and few other Skillmatics and which are doing that. So it has started to happen. And then in the larger side, you obviously have examples like Ola and Oyo and Zomato, who have tried doing that, sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully.
And Rahul, coming to the conclusion of the podcast, what do you read or what do you watch for your personal growth as an investor, as an individual?
Unfortunately, that entertainment example I gave applies to me also. That I get sucked into watching all kind of stuff on Netflix and Amazon and Hotstar and all. Uh, but I do like reading some of the history books, in the sense trying to understand real history. So currently, I was today only had started this book called The Ocean of Churn, by Sanjeev Sanyal. So I like reading history, and I also like reading history mixed with fiction. So at least those are two broad topics, and then third is behavioral economics. So it is fun to read about biases we have, how we behave, why we behave, what can nudge our behavior. Uh, so yeah, so these are some of the broad areas or topics I like reading.
Thank you so much, Rahul. It's been wonderful to have you on the 100x Entrepreneur podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, you know, and your wisdom, your learnings as an investor.
Great. Okay, thank you.